Well. John Wick 4 hit our theatres last week, and I must admit, I've been in two minds about seeing this movie. The third, Parabellum in my eyes, wasn't a great film. Yes, it built on the lore which was good, but there were glaring issues for me. The main one being Keanu looked heavy and slow in his movements. The only saving grace for John Wick 4 was hearing Chris Gore say it was a great movie and his second favourite to the franchise. With both the sour taste of 3 and Chris's positive comments, I went into the movie with low to mid expectations, and oh, come on! I'm pleased to say it was a very entertaining film with only a handful of criticisms. John Wick 4 starts where the shitfest of 3 left off, and now fully recovered John Wick with full health bar is ready to take on the high table with the help of some friends, the Bowery King played by Morpheus and Winston played by Lovejoy. John's first target is the Elder, who sits above the table, which he kills pretty quickly. This leads to something Hollywood seems to not understand. It leads to consequences. Oh, shit, son. The consequences of killing the Elder is that the High Table loses its shit and feels the only way to deal with this issue is to destroy the very essence of John, i.e. punish all those who have helped John or know him. To do this, the High Table send the Marquis, who effectively is judge, jury and executioner. He starts by sending the Harbinger, Clancy Brown, to Winston's Continental and condemning it. Consequences. The consequences being the Marquis now has a target on his back with Winston, a man far more intelligent who has been in the underworld for a lot longer. With Winston out on the street, or excommunicado, the Marquis' next target is to recruit a retired assassin to kill John. Meet Kane, a blind assassin who is one of the best, if not equal to John. Kane refuses as John is an old friend, but the Marquis threatens the life of Kane's daughter if he doesn't carry this out. Consequences. A life for a life.
You're going to die. Maybe not.
From New York, we jump to Japan, to the Continental over there, and we meet our next set of characters. Shimazu, the owner of the Continental, an old friend of John's, and we meet his daughter too, Akira. This is where we next find John asking for help, but wouldn't you Adam and Eve it? The High Table have just walked into the joint demanding to see Shimazu. We also meet another main character here, Mr. Nobody, and his dog. Shimazu leaves John and Akira on the rooftop and squares up to the High Table downstairs. As you can imagine, it all kicks off and everyone jumps into action and we get our first massive action scene. Being Japan and having Hiroku Sanada as Shimazu, the weapons of choice for this are samurai swords. A nice touch. Everyone gets their hands dirty here. Shimazu, Akira and John fight their way out. Kane is here too and he's working for the High Table, but he's very reluctant to fight and only doing so when he needs to, and when he does he tries not to kill. This is where we get to see the flair of Donnie Yen, who I didn't even realise is pushing nearly 60, and obviously we also have the flair of Hiroku Sanada. Both men square up and Shimazu pushes Kane to kill him in front of his daughter Akira. Reluctantly, Kane does this to the horror of Akira. Consequences. This is the first domino to fall for Kane with regards to where his loyalties lie.
I'll be waiting for you.
From there, John meets with Winston, who tells him he can end all this by duelling with the Marquis one-on-one, but he needs to be part of the family first. If you'd seen Parabellum, you'd know that he burnt his ticket with the Ruska Romans, so he has to go back there and make peace and get back into that family. His old family tell him his former boss is dead, and the only way to get back into the family is to kill the man who killed their boss. In comes Killer, or Scott Adkins in a fat suit.
Step up on your ego.
Now I've got to be honest, Scott played the part really well. I enjoyed his interactions with John, Kane and Mr. Nobody here. At the time I didn't even recognise Scott for Scott. I just knew I recognised the face.
I want to kill him. What about you, Mr. Wick?
And it was only when he literally roundhouse kicked John Wick, then it clicked and I was like, Scott Adkins, fuck. Ensue a big action scene with everyone, which again was very enjoyable and very Matrix looking. If you've not noticed, there's a very strong Matrix theme throughout the Wick films.
So it's a miracle. Guns. Lots of guns.
Partly because a lot of people who worked on The Matrix have also worked on John Wick.
Under the circumstances, your privileges are reinstated immediately. What do you need?
Guns. Lots of guns.
Obviously we have Morpheus, the Keymaker, Agent Johnson. John Wick is basically Neo in 3 and 4.
Not really.
as he seems to be invulnerable. Chad, the director, was Keanu's body double in The Matrix. You've got the scene in Berlin with the water pouring down. It's very much like The Matrix Revolutions when Neo fights Agent Smith at the end. Or the time when John Wick is sat in the underground waiting for the train to come is much like, again, in Revolutions, where he's waiting for his friends to come and help him. Despite all these similarities, though, and the stylised action, it all still very much feels like a standalone franchise. Just has elements of Matrix. Anywho, John does the deed and gets his ticket back, so now he can challenge the Marquis. Winston takes the proposal to the Marquis and uses the Marquis's lust for power to bait him into accepting John's terms, as well as his own. Consequences. This now puts the Marquis in harm's way for power, but also Winston's life is now entangled and could be ended if all goes wrong. John and the Marquis meet under the watchful eye of the Harbinger, and they plan out how the duel will happen, where, and with what weapons. Until that day, John now has to lie low and then get to the meeting point, otherwise he will face execution. This is now the setup for the larger series of action scenes, with John having to make his way to the final boss. We have a massive action scene at the Arc de Triomphe with cars smashing into people. We easily have the best sequence shot of the film, which, to be fair, I think everyone who's reviewed this has probably mentioned, and that's the overhead sequence in a building of John clearing the rooms using dragon breath rounds. A cheeky little nod back to Constantine, I imagine, before diving out of a fourth-storey window with fucking no harm done to him whatsoever, before leading to the final big scene of traversing up a long stairway while taking assassins out, trying to get to the top to meet the Marquis. John makes it and gets to have his duel. What will happen and who will be victorious? I'll leave that for you to watch for yourselves. So, what did I think of the film? It took me a few days to come to the conclusion, which, if you listen to Wookie Be Bad's Something Something Sunday stream that I had the pleasure of attending last week, you'll have heard me say that I found the film very entertaining.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
Yes, I was. However, I didn't think it was a great movie.
Fuck off.
I did think it was a good movie. It had its problems, but overall it was highly entertaining. Would I watch it again? Yeah, 100% I would. John Wick has always provided awesome action, and it was in bucket loads here. Keanu was on top form. He looked light on his feet, bearing in mind the man is 58. Fuck, most 58-year-olds would have broken their hip within the first 5 minutes of trying to do what Keanu did. And he did up to, I think, over 90% of his own stunts, which for me makes these films as good as they are. All of the cast were on top form, considering most of them are either close to, or are over 60 years of age. Christ, they even wheeled Lovejoy back out. That man must be a fucking 170 years old now. I mean, his teeth are about 3 years old, but I've got to be honest, I did nearly laugh a few times when he talked with his teeth clenched as though he was fucking worried that they were going to fall out of his head. I very much enjoyed the scene with the nunchucks, mainly because he fought with them much like you and I would. You know, he wasn't trying to be Bruce Lee, he was just wimbling these fucking things into as many people's faces as he possibly could, you know, like you and I would do. I was a big fan of the Berlin segment, as I said earlier. A few people have said they could have done without it, but I enjoyed the interactions, and I enjoyed the fight between Scott and Keanu as well. My favourite scene, as I said, was the dragon breath scene. It showed that there are still filming techniques that can still surprise the audience and excite you. You mix that with high-octane action and very cool and stylised look to the film, which ranged from ultra-modern to old-school opulence to gothic-looking buildings, and it just makes John Wick a completely stand-out film from everything else you've seen at the moment. All of this action does come at a price though. I have to admit towards the end, and especially with the stair scene, it just became a little bit same old, like it fatigued me slightly, because it could only be, you know, climb up the stairs, shoot, jiu-jitsu throw, and then double tap to the head, because what else can you do when everyone's running around you with bulletproof clothing? Which brings me to my next moan. Is John Wick the only man who can pull off successful headshots? Because he goes through over 100 assassins and none of those managed. And for me, when he was holding up his jacket constantly, I just had the picture of Dracula in my head, like Nosferatu hiding from the sun. And I'm sorry, but if a high impact bullet hits a jacket you're holding up, I'm pretty sure the energy from that bullet hitting your jacket would snatch the jacket from your grip, leaving you vulnerable for further shots. The other issue, which I struggled with, maybe a slight autism in me kicking in, but the first film was a very grounded film. It was set in our world with our physics and limitations. John Wick 2 stretched that by introducing the bulletproof clothing, but, you know, we still saw him take hits and get hurt by them. However, 3 left this world and went fucking into orbit to another planet, into one of fantasy, where our rules didn't apply anymore, and 4 continued with that. Now, for me, that's been a bit difficult to reconcile, which is probably why I say this is a good film, not a great film. I criticise other films for bending their laws, so be hypocritical for me to give John Wick a pass on it. If you're happy for John Wick to become its own fantasy and world building outside of our own, you won't don't have any issues with this film. You'll fucking love it. I'd have loved this more if they had set out like this from the start and not changed it 2 films in. All in all, John Wick Chapter 4 is a thoroughly entertaining film, showing how male characters who are strong, stoic, and lead their life by principles of sorts is something we've all been missing. Nobody wants to watch cucked male heroes or soy versions of one. Mark Ruffalo. Oh, cunt. We want to see men be men. As Jordan Peterson once said, a harmless man is not a good man. A good man is a very dangerous man who has that under voluntary control. If you like this video, please like, share and subscribe. Please leave a comment. Let me know what you thought of the film.